It started with a knock, soft, hesitant, the kind that made you pause the TV and wonder if you'd imagined it. I hadn't been expecting anyone. It was nearly midnight, and the rain was falling in slow, steady sheets outside my apartment window. I opened the door cautiously, and there he stood, Jace, my neighbor from across the hall. He looked soaked to the bone, a hoodie clinging to his frame, his eyes wide with something that wasn't quite fear, but wasn't far from it either. He spoke before I could say a word. "Can you help me?" His voice was quiet, strained. I didn't know that night would change everything. I stared at him for a beat, confused and alert. We weren't exactly friends, just neighbors who exchanged nods in the hallway and sometimes the occasional comment about the weather. But I'd noticed him, noticed the way his dark hair curled just behind his ear when it rained, or how he always carried books under his arm like they were armor. I'd noticed the tiredness behind his smile. I just didn't think he'd ever knock on my door, not like this. "Yeah," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." He hesitated before entering, eyes scanning my living room like it was unfamiliar territory. I watched him drip rain onto the welcome mat before I handed him a towel. "Thanks," he mumbled, rubbing it over his head. I tried not to watch the way his shoulders moved beneath his soaked hoodie, or how his hands trembled slightly. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I sat down across from him while he curled into the corner of my couch, still clinging to the towel like it might ground him. For a few minutes, neither of us said anything. Just the sound of the rain tapping against the windows and his uneven breathing. "I'm sorry," he said finally, voice breaking the silence. I didn't know where else to go. I nodded slowly. "Do you want to talk about it?" His eyes met mine. There was something hollow in them, like he was miles away and barely holding on. "I messed up. I thought I could fix things, or at least forget them. But I couldn't. And now I'm here, and I don't know what to do." It wasn't much of an explanation, but something in his tone kept me from pressing further. He looked like someone unraveling in real time. "You're safe here," I said. A bitter smile ghosted across his lips. That's the first time anyone said that to me in a while. He leaned back, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath since stepping inside. I studied him quietly, letting my mind replay every moment we'd crossed paths in the last 2 months. The time he offered to help carry my groceries, even though I hadn't asked. The late-night cigarette breaks where our eyes would meet, but neither of us spoke. The day I found a small note tucked under my doormat that read, "Hope today treats you kinder." I never knew it was from him. I knew now. He looked older tonight, somehow, like he'd aged years and days. I noticed a small bruise near his collarbone, half hidden beneath the neckline of his shirt. My stomach twisted, but I said nothing. I didn't want him to shut down. "You can crash here tonight," I offered. "The couch is lumpy, but it's dry." Jace nodded once, and for a flicker of a second, I saw something raw pass over his face. Relief, maybe, or something deeper, something fragile. As I got up to grab an extra blanket, he spoke again. "Do you believe people deserve second chances?" I paused in the doorway, the weight of the question hanging between us. "I think sometimes they do," I said. "Depends what they're trying to come back from." His eyes followed me as I handed him the blanket. He didn't say anything more, just gave a quiet nod and settled into the couch, pulling the blanket up to his chest like a child, trying to keep monsters out. I turned off the lights and went to my room, but sleep didn't come easy. My thoughts spun with questions I wasn't ready to ask and feelings I didn't understand. What had brought him to my door that night? What was he running from? Or toward? All I knew was this. Something had shifted. That knock wasn't random. That night wouldn't just pass. Something had begun, and even though I couldn't name it yet, I felt the gravity of it already. The door between our lives had opened, and part of me already knew it wouldn't be easy to close. When I walked into the living room the next morning, the gray light of dawn was filtering through the blinds. The apartment was quiet, except for the soft hum of the fridge and the occasional creak from the ceiling above. Jace was still there, asleep on the couch, curled in on himself like he was trying to disappear. The blanket had slipped halfway off him, revealing a pale arm marked with faint bruises. More than one, like they'd bloomed over time. I stood there for a long minute, unsure what to do. I hadn't expected him to still be here. I hadn't expected to feel anything beyond vague concern, either, but there was something else building beneath the surface. Something sharp and protective. I made coffee, careful not to make too much noise, but the smell must have woken him. His eyes blinked open slowly, dazed, like he was trying to remember where he was. "You're still here," I said gently, handing him a mug. "Guess I didn't dream it," he murmured, sitting up slowly. His voice was hoarse, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. "Thanks for letting me stay. You didn't have to. I wanted to." He looked at me then, really looked. "You're the first person who's said that to me in a long time." We sat in silence for a while, sipping coffee, watching the rain begin again outside the window. He pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders. There was a vulnerability to him that didn't feel performative. It wasn't the kind of sadness people use for sympathy. It was deeper. It was survival. "I wasn't going to come here," he said quietly. "I made it down the stairs, even unlocked my car. But I kept thinking about how quiet your place is, how you always nod when you see me like you actually mean it. And then I was at your door. Was that the same night?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He nodded. "Yeah, I wanted to ask what had happened. I wanted the story, the details, the names. But I didn't press. Instead, I said, you don't owe me anything. Not your past. Not your story. Not even an explanation." His lip twitched at that. "Yeah, well, I might give it to you anyway." He set the mug down on the table and leaned back. His name was Trent. We were together 3 years. He wasn't good to me, but I stayed. People think that means you're weak. But it's not weakness. It's hope and fear and shame all braided into one thick knot. I sat across from him and let his words hang in the air. I could hear the honesty in them, unpolished and vulnerable. It wasn't a confession. It was a release. He went on. "It got bad about a year ago. That kind of bad where you stop recognizing yourself. I kept telling myself it wasn't all his fault, that maybe I'd changed too, that maybe I deserved some of it. Last night we fought. He said things that made me feel like nothing. Then he left. Or maybe I did. I don't even remember. I just ended up at your door. I wanted to reach out, to put my hand on his knee or shoulder, somewhere to ground him. But I didn't. Not yet. I've been on my own for a long time," I said quietly. "I know what it's like to forget your worth when someone chips away at it long enough." He looked at me then, and something passed between us. Recognition. The kind of understanding that only comes from shared wounds. "Do you ever think you're too broken to be loved?" he asked, almost too softly to hear. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I got up and pulled open the blinds. The rain had stopped for the first time in 2 days. The sky outside was still overcast, but there was a break in the clouds, just enough to let a little light in. "I think we tell ourselves that," I said finally. "But it's not true." He watched the window, his face unreadable. "I want to believe that." I walked back over and sat beside him this time, close enough for our shoulders to almost touch. "Then start here. Believe it just enough for today." He didn't move away. If anything, he leaned in slightly, like he'd been waiting for that invitation. And even though neither of us said anything more, the silence felt different now. Less like absence, more like understanding. As the light grew brighter outside, I knew something had shifted again. Not dramatically, not with a grand gesture, but with something small, something real. I didn't know where this was heading or what I was getting pulled into, but I knew one thing for sure. He was no longer just a neighbor across the hall. He was becoming something else entirely. That night felt different. Jace had been staying with me for 3 days by then. Each evening blurred into the next. Takeout containers on the counter, quiet conversations on the couch, the occasional laugh that felt like sunlight cutting through a long stretch of cloud. He hadn't gone back to his place since the night he arrived, and I hadn't asked him to. His toothbrush sat beside mine now. His hoodie draped over the back of my chair. His scent lingered in the air long after he left the room. It was like he'd always been there. That night, after dinner, we didn't say much. We just sat on the couch, a quiet movie playing in the background, neither of us really watching. The space between us grew smaller until our legs touched, then stayed there like gravity had made the choice for us. He turned to me, eyes darker than usual in the dim light. "Do you ever think," he began, "that maybe some things are supposed to happen, even the ones that hurt?" "I think about that all the time," I said. His gaze dropped to my hands. Without a word, He reached over and took one, running his thumb slowly over my knuckles. My breath caught. It was such a simple thing, but it felt monumental. Like the whole world had just narrowed to that small, warm touch. And then he leaned in. His lips were soft and hesitant, searching for permission even as they met mine. I didn't hesitate. I kissed him back with something I hadn't felt in years, certainty. No fear, no second-guessing. Just the electric clarity of wanting someone and knowing they wanted you too. He pulled me closer. His hand gripped the back of my shirt. His breath hitched against my mouth. Every inch of him felt like a question I was finally ready to answer. We didn't speak again for a long time. Later, wrapped in the warmth of each other and the soft hush of night, I traced the edge of his jaw with my fingers. He smiled, eyes half closed, his body curled against mine like we were two puzzle pieces finally connecting. "I didn't expect this," he whispered. "Neither did I. I almost said I needed this, but I stopped myself. It was too soon for confessions. Too soon to let that softness out into the open where it could be hurt. But in that moment, nothing else existed. Just us." The next morning, I woke to the sound of the shower running and the smell of toast. Jace was in the kitchen, shirtless, hair damp, humming some tune under his breath while he made breakfast like it was the most natural thing in the world. I stood there in the doorway, watching him, the warmth from the night before still clinging to my skin. It felt real. It felt right. He turned and smiled when he saw me. "Hope you like burnt toast." I laughed. "As long as there's coffee, I'll survive." We sat and ate like a couple, like two people who didn't have a past filled with jagged edges. And for a little while, I let myself believe in the illusion. But then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen too quickly, then turned it over face down. Something shifted in his posture. Just a flicker, but I caught it. A tension that hadn't been there before. I didn't say anything, but my chest tightened. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said too fast. "Just spam. I'll block it." I nodded, but the feeling didn't go away. A few hours later, he said he had to run to the store. Kissed me on the cheek before slipping out the door, promising he'd be right back. He didn't come back. Not right away. An hour passed. Then two. I texted, asked if he was all right. No reply. Called once. No answer. Then, around sunset, someone knocked at the door. But it wasn't Jace. It was a man I didn't know, tall, lean, and wearing a look I'd seen before. The kind of look people wear when they've already decided you're the villain in their story. "You Miles?" he asked. I nodded, heart sinking. "Yeah. Who are you?" "I'm Trent," he said. "Jace's boyfriend. Or, X depends on what he's told you." The word boyfriend landed like a punch to the chest. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. "He does this," Trent continued. "Runs. Finds someone else. Makes them feel special. Then disappears. You're not the first." I closed the door before he could say anything else. I stood there, hand on the knob, staring at the floor. The coffee mugs from this morning still sat in the sink. The smell of him still clung to my shirt. And now I didn't know who he was anymore, or if I ever really did. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed with the lights off, the silence pressing in like a second skin. My mind looped through every conversation, every glance, every quiet moment we'd shared, searching for the signs I'd missed, the gaps in his stories, the hesitations, the too long silences. All of it was there, hidden in plain sight. Still, I kept hoping the knock would come again, that maybe he'd walk back through the door, eyes filled with regret, ready to explain everything. But the hours passed, and the only sound was the rain starting up again, a dull rhythm against the glass. By morning, I had almost convinced myself he wasn't coming back. Then, just after sunrise, I heard it, a soft knock barely audible. I stood frozen for a moment before opening the door. There he was. Jace looked hollowed out, like something inside him had been scraped clean. His hoodie was soaked, his hair clung to his forehead, and his eyes, they were tired in a way I hadn't seen before. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice almost gone. I stepped aside, wordless. He walked in slowly, like each step cost him something. He didn't sit, just stood in the middle of the room, arms wrapped around himself. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have told you everything from the start." I didn't speak. Not yet. I wasn't lying when I said I left Trent, he continued. I did, but I wasn't free. Not really. I thought I could run from it, from him, from who I was when I was with him. I thought if I came here, maybe I could start over. His voice cracked, and I didn't mean to drag you into it. You didn't deserve that. Why me? I asked finally. Why my door? He looked up at me, eyes red. Because you looked at me like I mattered. Like I wasn't broken beyond repair. I swallowed hard, arms folded across my chest to hold something in place that felt dangerously close to breaking. You made me feel like I could be someone better, he said. But I wasn't ready to be that person yet. I nodded slowly, letting the truth of his words sink in. It hurt, but it was honest. And somehow, that made the pain cleaner. I cared about you, I said quietly. Still do. But I won't be a refuge from someone else's storm. He looked like he'd been expecting that. He nodded, wiping a tear from his cheek with the back of his hand. I don't blame you, he whispered. We stood in silence again, the space between us thick with everything that had gone unsaid. And then he turned to leave. At the door, he paused. You're the kind of person people remember, Miles, even after they've lost the right to. Then he was gone. Days passed, then weeks. I didn't see Jace again, not in the hallway, not in the parking lot, not anywhere. His apartment stayed dark. Eventually, I noticed the curtains were gone and the mailbox had been emptied. He'd moved out without another word. For a while, I felt the ache of it every time I stepped into my apartment. His presence had seeped into everything. His laugh echoing faintly in the kitchen, the imprint of his body on the couch, the ghost of his touch in the sheets. But slowly it faded, not because I forgot, but because I learned to live around it. I went back to my routines. I started seeing friends again. I picked up the pieces of myself that had scattered in his absence. It wasn't fast and it wasn't easy, but it happened. Months later, I passed by the old unit he used to live in. The new tenant had painted the door blue. There was a welcome mat and a potted plant beside it. A new beginning for someone else. I stood there for a second, just long enough to remember him. Just long enough to let the memory wash over me and then roll back out like a tide that no longer dragged me under. He came into my life like a whisper in the dark, unexpected and full of longing. And though he left carrying pieces of me I hadn't meant to give, he also left something behind. A reminder that healing isn't always pretty and love isn't always enough. But honesty can still matter, even when it comes too late. I turned away from that door and walked home, not with a heavy heart, but with one a little more whole than before. Because some people arrive to show you what you've been missing, and some leave to teach you how to find it on your own.